Welcome back, guys, to Blackout War Stories. 74% of you still haven't subscribed. Before we start the video, hit that subscribe button. It only takes a second. The first time I saw it, the Wendigo wasn't hiding. It stood half-lit in the clearing, thin as a corpse left too long in the sun, its ribs showing through pale, torn flesh. The fog was low, crawling along the ground like it was alive, and the creature's breath steamed in the cold night as if it had lungs, if it even had lungs. For a second, I thought it was just some starved animal, a deer maybe, until its skull turned toward us, eye sockets hollow, and that jaw, hinged open wider than a man's shoulder. "Contact front," someone hissed, too quiet for the radio, and our rifles snapped up. But I couldn't move. My boots felt nailed into the mud. The forest around us was dead quiet, except for the clicking sound it made when it moved, like bones grinding against one another. Then it crouched low, unnatural, spider-like, and vanished into the mist before anyone fired a shot. For a moment, no one breathed, just the static of the radio, faint and broken. Then Davis muttered under his breath, "That wasn't human." He was right, and deep down we all knew it. We'd been marching through the Appalachian ridgeline on a classified sweep, something about old Cold War monitoring stations hidden out here. The brass told us it was routine recon, but nothing about it felt routine. Our maps didn't match the ground. Compass needles spun without reason. And now, whatever that thing was, it had been waiting for us. I kept scanning the tree line. Every trunk looked like it could hide something thin and tall. The fog was too thick, curling between our legs, soaking our trousers. It smelled faintly metallic, like old blood. "Eyes open," the sergeant whispered. "No chatter." We advanced, rifles up, boots crunching damp leaves. My heart was hammering hard enough I swore the others could hear it. Every snap of a twig made me twitch. Somewhere behind us, a branch broke, loud and deliberate. When we turned, nothing. Just the fog and black silhouettes of trees. But I swear I caught a glimpse. A sliver of white skin, a jawline stretched thin like parchment, slipping back into the dark. We pushed on, faster now, pretending discipline. No one wanted to admit what we'd seen. No one wanted to use the word. But it was there, gnawing inside all of us. The Wendigo, spoken like a curse, like something we weren't supposed to name. By the time we made it to the station, half the unit was already fraying. I could see it in their eyes, the way they scanned the woods too long, flinched at their own shadows. And I'll tell you this much, before I go on, the clearing wasn't the last time we saw it, not even close. The station was not on any of our maps. It sat half buried in the ridge, a squat concrete structure with rust bleeding down its walls like old wounds. A steel door stood crooked, as if something had forced it open long ago. The snow around the entrance hadn't been touched by boots, not ours, not anyone's, and yet I swear the fog there was heavier, darker, like it clung to that place. The sergeant motioned us forward. "Secure perimeter." We fanned out, rifles up, eyes on the tree line. My gloves were damp from the mist, cold seeping through to the bone. Every breath tasted like metal and wet moss. Somewhere above us, a crow cawed once, then went silent. Inside, the air was stale, thick with mildew and something sharper, chemical, like cleaning fluid that hadn't been used in decades. Our boots echoed against cracked tile. The overhead lights were dead, only our flashlights cutting beams through the dark. Davis muttered, "Jesus, it smells like a morgue." "Quiet," the sergeant hissed. I swept my beam across the walls, faded government stencils, property of U.S. Army signal, core numbers and codes, rusted lockers with the doors hanging open like broken jaws, a row of desks overturned, paper scattered and yellowed. But then I saw it. On one wall beneath peeling paint, someone had carved deep into the concrete letters, not English, long vertical slashes and curling lines, almost tribal, almost native, but not quite. The grooves were blackened, as if burned. "Sergeant," I whispered, "you need to see this." He stepped closer, frowning, ran his gloved hand across it. "Not our intel." "Keep moving." We went deeper. The main chamber was circular, lined with broken equipment, radios, reel-to-reel recorders, racks of dials and switches coated in dust. At the center sat a table, heavy oak, scarred and gouged. On it lay a reel of magnetic tape, brittle with age. "Bag it," the sergeant ordered. One of the privates carefully slid it into a pouch. I felt it then, a vibration, subtle at first, humming under the floor like a generator, though there was no power. My stomach tightened, hairs prickling on my neck. "Do you hear that?" I asked. No one answered, but I saw it in their faces. They felt it too. We pressed on into a side corridor. The walls narrowed, water dripping from the ceiling. At the end, a blast door stood half open. Beyond it, a storage room, crates stamped with faded cereals, shelves lined with glass jars, their contents long rotted. Then we found the bones, stacked in the corner, half covered by a rotted tarp. Too many to count. Long femurs, cracked skulls, spines curled like question marks. Some were small, children maybe. Davis cursed under his breath and backed away. Another soldier gagged, hand clamped over his mouth. The sergeant just stared. His jaw worked, grinding his teeth. "Not a word of this goes in the report," he said finally. "You understand me?" We understood. Orders were orders. But those bones weren't old, not ancient. Some still had shreds of dried flesh clinging to them. That's when we heard it again. Not from outside, from deeper in. A scraping, slow, deliberate, like something dragging claws across the concrete. Every rifle snapped up. The beam of my flashlight trembled as I aimed it down the corridor. "Movement," someone whispered. The sound grew louder, echoing. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Then silence. We waited, breathing hard. The silence stretched until it felt unbearable. Then sudden, something rushed past the end of the hall. A blur, pale and impossibly fast. My light caught a glimpse. Long limbs, a skeletal frame, skin stretched tight, and that face. Hollow sockets, a grin too wide. The Wendigo. It hadn't left us in the woods. It was here. The sergeant barked, "Fall back, out, now!" We stumbled over each other, retreating through the station. Our boots slammed against the tile, rifles up. But the thing didn't follow. Not yet. I swear I felt it watching, just beyond the beam of light. Waiting. When we finally spilled out into the night, the cold air hit me like a slap. I dragged my mask down and sucked in deep lungfuls, though it did nothing to clear the taste of rot from my mouth. We set a perimeter, rifles outward, while the sergeant called it in on the secure channel. But the radio crackled with static. No response. Davis crouched beside me, whispering, "You saw it, right?" I wasn't losing my mind. I looked at him. His eyes were wide, bloodshot. His hands shook, even as he gripped his rifle. "You saw it," I said. We both knew we weren't supposed to admit it. Not out loud. Not with the sergeant listening. That night we set camp 50 yards from the station. Fires were forbidden, so we huddled in the cold, breath frosting in the air. No one slept. Every snap of a twig put us on edge. Shadows moved wrong in the tree line. At some point, I must have dozed, because I woke to Davis shaking me hard. "It's out there," he whispered. I followed his gaze. Just beyond the trees, in the fog, two pale shapes glowed faintly like eyes reflecting light. Too high up for an animal, too still for a trick of sight. Then in a voice that wasn't a voice, more like a thought crawling under my skin, I heard it. "Hungry." I froze. My blood turned to ice. The shapes blinked out. Davis and I didn't speak after that. What was there to say? By morning, one of our men was gone. No sign of struggle, just his rifle lying on the ground where he'd been posted. The sergeant told us he'd deserted, walked off in the night, but none of us believed it, and none of us dared to argue. We didn't pack up at dawn. Normally, the sergeant would have had us moving before first light, but not that morning. Instead, he kept us circling the camp, double-checking gear, checking watches, radios, weapons, as if staying busy could keep us sane. Nobody said it out loud, but we were waiting, half expecting the missing man to stumble back through the fog. He never did. When the sun broke over the ridge, it barely cut through the mist. The Appalachian trees stood black and skeletal against the pale light, their branches clawing at the sky. And that smell lingered, faint but undeniable, coppery, wet, like blood carried on the damp air. The sergeant gathered us. His voice was steady, but his eyes were hollow. Listen up. Official word is Private Miller deserted. He's not our concern anymore. We stay on mission, sweep the area, secure intel, extract. Clear? We all nodded. None of us believed him. None of us trusted what mission meant anymore. We set out in staggered file. I was near the back, rifle up, eyes flicking between trees. Every shadow seemed too deep. Every gust of wind sounded like breathing. 2 hours in, Davis fell back beside me. His face was pale, jaw clenched. They're lying to us, he muttered. Keep your voice down. I'm serious. That thing in the woods, you know damn well it wasn't some deserter. And the station, those bones. He broke off, shaking his head. That wasn't supposed to be there. None of this was. I wanted to tell him to shut up, to follow orders, stay quiet, keep moving. But my throat tightened, because he was right. And worse, I'd started noticing something else. Our maps were useless. Trails appeared and vanished. Compass needles spun like they were drunk. Even the GPS sets clicked with static. It felt like the forest itself was folding around us, nudging us deeper, keeping us lost. Around midday, we stopped for rations. The silence was heavier than usual, broken only by wrappers tearing and the click of canteens. That's when Private Lopez whispered, "Do you hear that?" We froze. At first I thought it was wind, but then I realized no, it was humming, low, rhythmic, almost like chanting, carrying faint through the trees. The sergeant barked, "Shut it down now!" We killed our gear, even the radios listening. The sound grew louder. Voices, dozens, maybe more. But there was no direction to it. It came from everywhere, echoing through the fog. Lopez's hand trembled on his rifle. "They're all around us." The chanting stopped as suddenly as it had begun. We waited, hearts pounding. Then a scream tore through the woods. Sharp, guttural, cut off too fast. It was close, too close. The sergeant motioned us forward, rifles ready, and we pushed through the trees in formation. My boots slipped on wet leaves, my breath loud in my mask. We found nothing, just an empty stretch of forest, fog curling low, trees creaking in the wind. But in the dirt lay blood, fresh, still steaming in the cold. "Back to formation," the sergeant snapped. "Now!" We pulled tight, eyes in every direction. But I couldn't shake the feeling. We weren't searching. We were being herded. That night we set camp again, tighter this time. Claymores rigged around the perimeter, motion sensors planted, tripwires strung between trees. Still, none of it gave comfort. We'd seen what we were up against. Traps wouldn't stop it. No one spoke. No one slept. I lay in my bag, staring into the black. Every so often I'd hear movement, slow footsteps circling just beyond the tripwire line. Once or twice I swore I saw a shape, tall and gaunt, moving between the trees. At some point I drifted into half-sleep. That's when I heard it again. Not chanting this time, whispers, right beside me. I shot up, rifle in hand, scanning. The others stirred, cursing, scared. But there was nothing. Nothing except the whispers fading, like breath pulled back into the fog. By morning, another man was gone. This time it was Lopez. His sleeping bag lay empty, rifle untouched. No struggle, no sound. Just gone. The sergeant's face was gray, lips pressed tight. "Same story," he said. "Desertion. Write it down." No one moved. No one wrote. Davis snapped. "Desertion? Are you blind? They're being taken one by one." The sergeant's hand shot to his sidearm. "That's enough, soldier." Davis froze. His eyes darted to me, wide with disbelief. But he said nothing more. We marched again. The terrain grew harsher, ridges rising steep, rocks slick with moss. The fog clung thick, swallowing sound. My sense of direction was gone. I couldn't tell east from west. All I knew was the feeling, like we were walking into a trap, one step at a time. Hours passed. Then we found something. A cabin. It sat crooked on a slope. Wood rotted, roof sagging. Windows boarded. Smoke long dead in the chimney. The sergeant sent us in. The smell hit first. Sweet rot, like meat gone bad. Inside, the floor was warped. dust thick on broken furniture. A lantern sat overturned on the table. Then I saw the marks. Every wall was carved, floor to ceiling. Same strange script we'd seen in the station. Long vertical lines, curling hooks. Some cuts were deep enough to gouge through boards entirely. And over it all, smeared handprints. Dark, brown, old blood. Davis whispered, "This place is wrong. We shouldn't be here." I agreed, but before anyone could move, we heard it again. That scraping from the roof. We froze, rifles aimed upward. Dust sifted from the ceiling, settling on our helmets. The sound crawled slowly, back and forth, then stopped. Silence, the sergeant motioned. "Out, now!" We moved for the door. That's when the roof caved in. Wood splintered, dust exploding as something dropped into the center of the cabin. It stood taller than any man, thin as bone, its arms too long, fingers hooked like claws. Its face was stretched tight, lips split in a grin that showed too many teeth. Eyes like pale lights burned in its skull. The Wendigo, it screamed, a sound like metal tearing, like every scream of every soul it had ever taken, echoing through the cabin. We opened fire. Rounds tore into the thing, wood exploding around it. It staggered, shrieking, but didn't fall. It moved faster than sight, a blur, slamming one of the men against the wall with such force his spine cracked like a twig. "Out! Out!" the sergeant bellowed. We poured through the door, bullets still flying, the Wendigo thrashing in the dust and fire of ricochets. I don't know if we hit it. I don't know if it mattered. We ran until our lungs burned, until our boots bled. Only when we collapsed in another clearing did I realize 3 more men were gone, taken in the chaos. We never saw them again. That night, the sergeant didn't speak. He sat apart from us, staring into the trees. His radio clicked in bursts, static hissing. He whispered into it, too low for us to hear. Davis leaned close to me. His voice shook. "This isn't recon. This isn't about old stations or maps. They knew what was here. That's why they sent us." I wanted to tell him he was wrong, but the truth was already eating through me. Because in the distance, through the fog, I could see them. Not just one. Shapes, thin, tall, pale, watching. And I knew we weren't getting out alive. We were 7 men when the sun rose again. 7 out of 12. No one spoke during morning checks. No one dared count out loud. We just moved through motions. Magazines slammed into rifles, straps tightened, eyes flicking to the fog. Davis looked hollowed out, skin gray, lips trembling even when he was silent. The sergeant barked orders like nothing was wrong. "Form up." Heading east, but east meant nothing. The compass spun like it had a fever. Even the GPS was fried, spitting lines of gibberish across the screen. East, west, north. It was all the same now. Just fog, trees, and the gnawing sense that we were being pulled deeper into something we weren't meant to see. We marched anyway, because what else could we do? Around midday, we found the trench. It cut through the forest floor like an old scar, lined with rotting sandbags, rusted helmets half buried in mud. The earth smelled of wet iron. I crouched, running my glove across a fragment of barbed wire. It looked decades old. Korean War, Vietnam, maybe older. But no maps we'd studied showed combat zones this far into the Appalachians. The trench stretched on, vanishing into the fog. We followed it, rifles ready, until we reached a pit. At first I thought it was just a sinkhole. Then I saw the bones. Hundreds of them. Tangled, broken, stacked like cordwood. Not neatly, not buried. Thrown, piled. Some still had uniforms clinging to them. American fatigues, old patterns, long out of use. Others were older still. Wool coats, rusted buttons, helmets split down the middle. Soldiers from different wars all dumped in the same grave. Davis choked out, "This is a cover-up." The sergeant shot him a look so sharp it could have cut steel. Not a word. Do you hear me? Not one goddamn word. But we all heard it. And once you see something like that, you can't unsee it. That night, camp was set against a ridge. We rigged flares, sensors, every precaution we had left. Nobody trusted the tripwires, not after seeing the Wendigo move like smoke. But pretending we had defenses was the only way to stay sane. I couldn't sleep. I lay there, staring at the fog twisting between trees, listening to the forest breathe. Somewhere out there, branches cracked, twigs snapped. Then faintly I heard voices. Not chanting this time, not whispers. Voices I knew, Miller's voice, Lopez's, even Corporal Jenkins, whose back I'd seen broken in that cabin. They were calling my name, calm, almost casual. Come on, come out here. We need you. I sat up, rifle in hand, shaking. My skin crawled. Across the fire pit, Davis stared at me wide-eyed. You hear them too? I nodded, throat dry. We didn't move. We didn't answer. But the voices went on, circling the camp, too familiar to ignore. By dawn, they were gone. The sergeant pushed us harder the next day. No breaks, no rations, just miles of marching until my legs burned and my chest heaved. We came across another structure, this one concrete, smaller. Its roof collapsed. Inside, water pooled, knee-deep. Rusted lockers leaned against cracked walls. A single chair sat in the center, bolted to the floor, leather straps dangling from its arms. A medical chair, or an interrogation one. The sergeant scanned the room, jaw tight. We move on. But Davis lingered, staring at the straps. They knew, he muttered. They were experimenting, testing it, whatever that thing is. The sergeant wheeled on him. Shut your mouth, Private. Davis didn't. He took a step closer, eyes burning. You think we don't get it? You think we don't see? This isn't recon. It's a goddamn disposal mission. They sent us here because we're expendable. The sergeant's pistol was out before anyone breathed. That's an order, soldier. Stand down. For a second, I thought Davis would fight him. His jaw worked, his hands trembled. Then he lowered his rifle, lips curling in disgust. But he was right, and we all knew it. That night was the worst. Fog thick enough to choke on. The forest louder than usual. Branches creaking, owls crying, something large moving just beyond sight. We sat in a circle, rifles clutched, eyes darting. Nobody slept. Around 200, the motion sensors went off, beeps sharp in the silence. Flares burst overhead, red light staining the fog. And in that glow, we saw them. Not one, not two, dozens. Thin figures moving between trees, pale skin gleaming, eyes glowing faint. They stood still, watching us through the smoke. One of the privates fired. A panicked burst into the tree line. The figures scattered like shadows, too fast to follow. We all opened up then, muzzle flashes strobing in the fog. The forest roared with gunfire, bark exploding, brass clattering into the dirt. But when the smoke cleared, the tree line was empty. No bodies, no blood, nothing, just silence. By morning, 2 more men were gone, rifles left behind. No signs of struggle. We were 5. I didn't even ask their names, I couldn't. Naming the dead made it too real. The sergeant looked worse than any of us. Eyes sunk deep, face hollow, lips cracked from the cold. Still, he muttered into the radio over and over, whispering code phrases we didn't understand. Finally, Davis snapped. He grabbed the sergeant's shoulder, spun him around. Who the hell are you talking to? Command? You think they're gonna save us? They sent us here to die. The sergeant didn't argue, he just stared. And that was worse. We kept moving, not because we had direction, but because staying still meant waiting for death. Sometime late that afternoon, we stumbled on another clearing. At its center stood a tower, steel, rusted, 50 feet high, like an old radio mast. Cables snaked down into the earth. We circled it cautiously. Davis craned his neck, squinting up. Signal tower. Cold War era, maybe. But why the hell's it still here? The sergeant's face was unreadable. Bag photos, keep moving. But I felt it. That vibration again, humming low through the ground, like the whole earth was trembling. And in that hum, I swear I heard words. Not English, not human. The Wendigo was close. That night I woke to screams, not one, not two, dozens all around us, rising in a chorus. I jolted upright, rifle in hand. Davis was already firing into the fog, screaming curses. Figures darted between trees, pale and fast, circling, closing in. The sergeant bellowed orders, but his voice was lost in the chaos. Muzzle flashes strobed, Flares burst overhead. Shadows lunged and vanished. Then I saw it. Not the pale figures, the Wendigo itself. It stepped into the clearing, towering, its ribs glowing faint, its jaw stretching wider than a man's head. Its eyes burned like ice. I froze. My rifle shook. It didn't rush. It didn't scream. It just watched. And then it smiled. The firefight raged around me, but in that moment, everything went silent. Just me, the fog, and that grin carved into its skull. I blinked, and it was gone. But the damage was done. 2 more men dragged into the fog. Their screams cut off quick. We were 3, me, Davis, and the sergeant. The sergeant finally admitted it the next morning. He sat on a rock, eyes red, voice flat. They told me it was recon. Sweep an old station, retrieve data. But then I got secondary orders. Quiet ones, no paper trail. Said if we found anything unnatural, we were to document, contain, and, if necessary, sacrifice. Davis laughed, bitter and broken. Sacrifice? That's what we are to them? Sacrifices? The sergeant didn't answer, but he didn't have to. We all knew, and from the fog, I swear I heard it again. That wordless whisper. Hungry. We were 3 men wrapped in cold and secrets, and none of it fit inside our skins anymore. The sergeant said we'd move at first light, but dawn didn't come the way it should. The fog just lightened enough to show the shape of our breath, the slick shine on our rifles, the tired lines cut into Davis's face. He wouldn't look at me or the sergeant. He watched the tree line like it had his name in its mouth. We had no plan except forward. Forward was a direction you made up when you didn't want to say lost. The tower loomed to our west, a rusted spinal column jutting up from the earth. Cable bundles ran from its base toward the ridge, thick as serpents and slick with dew. I tried to ignore the vibration humming there, the barely audible thrum that was more feeling than sound. It made the fillings in my molars ache. "Short halt," the sergeant said, hand up. His voice had that careful calm leaders use when they're trying not to break in front of you. We recon the tower base. Quick sweep, then we keep moving. Davis scoffed without turning. Right, quick sweep. Then we pretend our dead walked off for coffee. Watch it, the sergeant said. Say it, Davis hissed. Say you knew. Say they briefed you to bring us as bait. I didn't know details, the sergeant answered quietly. I knew there were anomalies. I knew they wanted recordings if we found anything off. I didn't know it would be this. This. He didn't say Wendigo. None of us wanted to summon it by name, like a flare you never meant to fire. We moved. At the base of the tower, we found a concrete pillbox half swallowed by moss. The door was canted just enough to slip a hand through. Davis gave it a tug, and the hinges cried out, metal bending against old rust, a noise like a wounded thing. The smell behind it was stale, metallic, layered with mildew and something sharper, as if a battery had been left to bleed. Inside, a narrow room with racks of dead electronics, green glass indicators powdered to dust, a fallen clipboard trapped under a coil of cable. The floor was etched with scrapes where something heavy had been dragged in circles, over and over, like a dog pacing in a cage. A single desk sat facing a small window, the glass painted black from the inside. The sergeant drifted to a locked metal cabinet in the corner and put his shoulder into it until the latch gave. He pulled 3 items free, an aluminum case, a bundle of manila folders wrapped in twine, and a canvas satchel stamped with a faded eagle. He set them on the desk carefully, as if they might explode. I took the folders. When the knot gave, dust bloomed like gray smoke. On top, an index card typed, SIGINT Anomaly Record Echo Rift Site. Beneath, pages filled with redactions. Thick black bars swallowed whole paragraphs. The fragments visible made less sense than silence. Subject manifests mimicry at range. Duration of voice lure increases with hunger cycle. Local indigenous warnings were ignored per directive. Sacrifice metrics denied. My stomach turned. There were photocopied photos too. Grainy stills of a clearing. In the first, the trees looked normal. In the second, shadows between trunks lengthened as if pulled by hands. In the third, the camera had been lifted off the ground. The horizon skewed. A smear of pale, elongated shape crossed the frame like a fingernail traced across wet paint. "You keep reading that and you'll never sleep again," Davis said, voice low. He had the aluminum case open. Inside were 3 reel tapes sealed in brittle plastic and a weather-stained note that said, "Play only with damper engaged." Someone had underlined "only" 3 times, hard enough to tear the paper. The sergeant found a portable player on a lower shelf. The rubber belts inside were cracked but intact. He checked a battery compartment, miracle of miracles. A set of old cells still wrapped in wax paper, dated years back. He slotted them in, turned the thing over, and pointed at a rotary switch labeled damping level. "If we even try this," he said, "we keep it low. We listen maybe 30 seconds, no more." "Why listen at all?" Davis asked. "Because if we bring nothing back but ghosts," the sergeant said, "they'll call it hysteria and stamp training incident on our graves. We need proof." He didn't say to die for it, but I heard it anyway. He slipped the tape on. The reels ticked into motion slowly, rubber complaining. Static filled the pillbox, a soft storm. Then came the forest. Wind, leaves, an occasional crow. It sounded almost ordinary, lullaby ordinary, and I felt my shoulders loosen without permission. A voice entered, male, clipped by old training. "Echo Rift Site, Log 1-2, local time 0400. Subject remains beyond perimeter. Mimicry attempts recorded." The voice paused. In the pause, something whispered. It was far back in the soundscape, like breath across the microphone, like a word learning how to be a word. I leaned involuntarily closer. "Damper at 40%, the man said. "Approach 2. The whisper moved nearer. The hairs on my forearms lifted in sympathy. Then it found a shape and slid into it. "Sergeant, that's you!" A second voice, the exact cadence of alarm and relief. The man on the tape breathed out. "Identify." A crackle. "Miller here. I got turned around." The man on the tape swore softly. "No Miller on this team." Silence, carrying that thin electric whine the reel kept producing. Old capacitors dying, maybe. Then the Miller voice returned. Wrong now. The wrongness small but total, like a photograph with the light just slightly off. "It's cold. Can you open the door?" A scraping. The recorder picked up the mic being moved, fingers against metal. The first man's voice returned, hard. "Stay beyond the second fence. You do not cross the dash." Then the whisper came right up against the mic, a sound both inside and outside your skull, and said my name. Not the man on the tape's name. Mine. I slapped the stop button on reflex. The reels locked. The pillbox swallowed sound again, like it had been holding its breath. Davis was staring at me with a look halfway between fury and fear. "You heard that?" "I heard nothing," the sergeant said, too fast. "It said his name," Davis hissed. "It said his name." "Equipment corruption," the sergeant said, jaw rigid. Subaudibles, pareidolia. I wanted to believe him. I needed to. But my name was still ringing in my molars like a struck tuning fork, and I could taste metal in the back of my throat. We packed the tapes in the folders. The sergeant's hands shook when he slid the aluminum case into his ruck. On the way out, I noticed something I'd missed coming in. Tally marks cut into the pillbox door. Hundreds of them. Some deep, some faint, wandering when the blade had slipped. Every 20 marks were boxed by a double line. I lost count near 200 before the marks wandered into the hinge and vanished. Outside air, cold, damp, a relief you could almost drink. For a handful of heartbeats, the forest was just a forest. Then the tower hummed again, not loud, not obvious, just enough to make your sinuses buzz. "We're leaving," the sergeant said. We skirted the ridge following animal paths that braided between laurel thickets and black spruce. Clouds pressed low. Somewhere distant, far below the fog line, water moved. Maybe a creek. If we could find it, we could follow it downhill. Then down and down until a road, a farm, a house with a working phone. Civilians didn't know what to do with things like the Wendigo, but they did know how to be human. And I needed human like a drowned man needs the surface. We didn't make the creek. We made a fence. It rose from the trees with no warning concertina wire and steel pickets, 3 meters high, sloped inward, octagon perimeter around a compound we should have seen on satellite photos and never did. The fog parted just enough for us to take it in. 2 low buildings, a generator shed, a satellite dish on a swivel mount, a flagpole with no flag. Davis swore softly. "You have got to be kidding me." The sergeant went still in that particular way he had, like a statue deciding whether to be a man again. He knew this place, or at least he knew of it. "Eyes sharp," he said. "No sudden moves." We approached the gate. It was locked but not alarmed. The chain was new, the lock old. The sergeant produced a pouch and a pick. The gate sighed open like it had been practicing. Inside, mud scuffed. Boot prints leading to and from the larger building, some fresh enough to hold water. The smell of diesel floated near the shed. Someone had been here within a day. Hours, maybe. Davis turned a slow circle. "Rescue," he said. He hated the word even as he used it, like he was chewing something bitter. "Or clean up." The sergeant put a fist up. "Stack." We stacked on the larger door. It opened on a corridor scabbed with peeling paint, fluorescent fixtures buzzing sickly. The power was on. A hum rolled under the floor, the generator shed doing its job. On the left, an office, file cabinets, a corkboard without pins, a desk with rings from coffee mugs. On the right, a room full of monitors showing static snow on every screen. "Secure," I said. We moved deeper. At the far end, a heavy door with a keypad and a tiny window. Behind the glass, I saw a room like a surgery suite stripped of mercy. Steel table, drains in the floor, cameras welded into corners. The keypad was dead, but the hinges weren't. The sergeant put the charge on the pins and turned away. The pop was dull, the sound of a knuckle cracking. The door swung inward with funeral slowness. The smell hit hard bleach and something under it that bleach didn't beat. My gorge rose. I swallowed it back down. On the table lay restraints, old leather, oiled. A circle scorched into the ceiling above, as if a light had burned there too hot, too long. The walls had that same script I'd seen at the station. Cut and recut, lines on top of lines until they formed a kind of scar tissue text. Some strokes had bled rust down the paint. Davis was breathing hard. "This is where they tried to make sense of it." "Or to bait it," I said. He didn't argue. The sergeant crossed to a console against the wall. It was newer than the room, a clean rectangle behind plexi. He used a knife to pry away the cover. A key was taped behind it. He held it up, arched a brow at the room like he was asking for permission, then turned the lock. The monitors in the other room flickered to life as if waking from a spell. Static resolved into camera views. The gate, the yard, the tower at the old ridge, so the compound was networked to the mast. A bare corridor with a single chair bolted to the floor. A fourth feed showed a cell. In it, a man in fatigue sat on the edge of a cot, hands clasped, head down. His hair was grown out just enough to look wrong on a soldier. His face was thin, branded by sleeplessness. He looked up at the camera slowly, like he knew exactly when we would be watching. It was Miller. Davis stepped forward, practically putting his nose to the glass. "You're dead," he whispered. "You're..." The voice that came from the tinny speaker wasn't a voice so much as an imitation of one. It wore Miller's tones like a suit wearing a man. "Open the door," it said, perfectly calm. "I'm cold." I took a step back without meaning to. "Audio circuit is one way," the sergeant said. His face had gone the color of paper. "That speaker is tied to the camera bus. It shouldn't..." He cut himself off. On the monitor, Miller smiled. It was a child's attempt at a smile drawn from memory. Too many teeth, wrong muscles flexing. Then he leaned close to the lens. "Please," he said. Davis slammed his palm against the glass. "Stop," he said without turning. "Stop talking to it like it's..." The monitor cut to black, then flashed. The cell empty now, the cot undisturbed. No door had opened. No lock had clicked. "Enough," the sergeant said. He reached past us and hit the main breaker. The room shuddered into silence. The hum of the generator died, then returned as the failover kicked. But the monitors stayed dark now, sockets like open eyes. We backed out of the room like you leave a chapel you don't believe in anymore. On the way to the exit, we passed a glass case we'd missed. Inside was a military field manual with a false cover. The real title lay beneath, stamped faint, Psychoacoustic Containment, Field Revision. Someone had tucked a Polaroid between pages. The picture showed a line of men standing shoulder to shoulder in the fog. A shape towered behind them, just out of focus, like a photograph of a storm getting ready to become a storm. Each man smiled. Two had their eyes closed like they were enjoying the sun. Davis took the manual. "If I die," he said to me, not the sergeant, "you burn this or you bury it deep. You don't hand it over." I nodded. My mouth was too dry for words. We left by the gate, locking it behind us like good little soldiers, though I couldn't tell you why. Maybe because locks were one of the last rules we had left. Back under the trees, the fog felt closer, the forest smaller, like the world had shrunk to the radius of our breath. We moved without talking, feet choosing the line of least resistance, which is never the line of greatest safety. Water over stone, a sane sound, honest. When we broke through the brush, it showed itself like a gift. Narrow, fast, the bed a scatter of quartz and shale. On its banks, fresh prints, human boots, dog tracks, deer slots. The forest still knew how to be a forest. That gave me a courage so small it almost didn't exist. We waded in. The shock of cold bit our calves. The water carried our scent, our noise, a little bit of our fear. We followed it downhill, rifles high, eyes scanning. That's when the voices came again. They didn't call our names this time. They spoke to each other, easy as friends at a bar, low and warm and safe. They used our slang. They used the sergeant's cadence. They imitated a joke one of our dead had told about a mess hall sandwich that tasted like axle grease. They were perfect, and that was their sin. "Keep eyes forward," the sergeant said. "Nothing behind you matters." A branch cracked up slope, another to the right, a third ahead. The creek's easy music drowned detail, turned the forest into a single rope of sound I couldn't unwind. "Left bank," the sergeant said. "On me." We went left. The bank rose in a slippery apron of mud and roots. My boots slid. Davis grabbed my sleeve and held me up with a grunt. That's when the Wendigo stepped into the creek 50 feet upstream, silent as a thought. The water didn't splash around its legs. It folded obedient, like the creek bowed and restitched itself to let it pass. Its chest was a cage you could almost see through. What looked like steam rose off its shoulders, faint. Its head turned slowly, a telescope of bone. Those knot eyes found us and held us without touching. I heard the tape whisper again. My name, the old please, the child's smile. And then I heard another sound layered beneath, a camera whirring, very small. The sergeant lifted his rifle by instinct, then lowered it just as fast. "Not here," he said, voice steady on purpose. "Not in the water." The Wendigo tilted its head. The gesture was curiosity, or mockery, or the muscle memory of the last human it had learned. Then it lifted one arm too long and pointed past us. We didn't look. We ran. Branches whipped faces, roots clawed knees. The creek leaped beside us and then away. I didn't hear the sergeant's breathing. I didn't hear Davis swearing. I heard only the soft click as that long finger settled back to its side and the brief, amused rumble of something like a laugh. We didn't stop until the water vanished underground and the creek bed turned to stones. We collapsed under a hemlock whose trunk was big enough to shelter all three of us. I bent double, hands on knees, the taste of blood in my mouth from air that had gone in too fast, too ragged. After a while, the sergeant said, "We're going to the station." Davis stared at him like he'd just suggested we sleep in a grave. We were at the station. "The other one," the sergeant said. "The one we weren't supposed to find. There's always a second sight, always a control. If we can get to it, there's a chance there's a line out." Davis laughed softly. It wasn't a nice sound. "A line out or a cleanup unit? Which do you think hits first?" "I don't know," the sergeant said. He looked down at his hands like he expected them to be someone else's. "But we can't keep letting it pick us off. We need walls and a door we can close." "And a damper," I said before I meant to. My tongue still remembered the reel's electric taste. If that manual means anything, They built these places to listen for it. Maybe you can flip that, make it listen to us. Davis turned to me. You want to talk to it? I wanted to stop talking to me, I said. He thought about that. Then he nodded once. Fine. Control site. We move. I checked the magazine in my rifle even though I knew the count. The ritual steadied me. When I looked up, the sergeant was watching us both, eyes clear for the first time in days. On me, he said. We stood. The forest held its breath, the fog drew nearer, and somewhere behind us the Wendigo stepped lightly out of the creek it hadn't disturbed and followed without sound. We followed the ridge line east, though east was just a word we kept alive between us. Compass needles spun in lazy circles. The sun was smothered by fog so thick it seemed the forest grew inside a lung. We didn't talk much anymore. The sergeant barked small orders, pace, spacing, eyes up, but his voice was hoarse, stripped of authority. Davis muttered to himself sometimes, curses and prayers mixed into one long stream. And me? I just counted steps, 10 at a time. 10 was manageable. The forest never looked the same twice. A dead pine I'd marked earlier would vanish when I turned back. Streams curved against their own flow. The air smelled of wet iron, like blood steamed off the earth. That's when we saw the fence again. Not the same one, or maybe it was. Concertina wire, steel pickets, another octagonal enclosure. My stomach turned. The forest was folding us into loops, dragging us back toward its teeth. Davis spat into the dirt. We're walking inside its mouth. The sergeant didn't argue. He just said, "On me," and pushed through a gap where the wire sagged. Inside was another compound, nearly identical to the first. Low buildings, a dish on a mount, windows dark, but this one felt older. Moss drowned the walls. The generator shed was collapsed, the flagpole bent in half, and yet the humming was stronger here. We moved toward the main building. The door gave with a screech. Inside, the air was colder than outside, thick with mold and copper. Hallways stretched into shadow, lined with peeling posters. U.S. Army recruitment, survival diagrams, nuclear warning symbols. A handprint smeared in dried black streaked across one poster. The words, "Be all you can be," disappeared under it. We cleared rooms one by one, offices with overturned desks, paper curled in yellow, a barracks with bunks still made, blankets stiff with mildew, a mess hall with trays stacked neatly on the counter, each one coated in a layer of green fuzz. And then we found the control room. Banks of machines lined the walls, dials and switches, a central console still lit with a faint amber glow. The hum vibrated through the floor like a living thing. In the center sat a chair with leather straps. The seat was scorched black, the straps stiff and brittle. Davis whispered, "Same setup, same damn bait station." The sergeant ignored him. He moved to the console, flipping through switches, scanning labels stenciled in fading paint. Damper, signal gain, threshold. He paused at one dial labeled containment field. Its needle twitched faintly, though the power shouldn't have been working. He looked at us. "This is it. This is the control." "Control of what?" Davis demanded. "You think you're gonna drive that thing with knobs?" "It's not a radio. It's a goddamn curse walking on legs." The sergeant's jaw clenched. "If it listens through frequency, if it hears us, then this is the only weapon we have." I stepped closer, eyes on the console. My ears rang faintly, the hum bleeding into my skull. And behind it, just barely, I thought I heard words. Not English, not any language I knew. A chorus, overlapping, murmuring through static. I whispered, "It's already on." The sergeant turned a knob. The hum deepened, and my vision shivered at the edges, like heat waves bending air. The walls seemed closer, then farther. My rifle felt heavier in my hands. And then, voices, clear this time, dozens, maybe hundreds. Some were the men we'd lost, Miller Lopez, Jenkins. Their tones perfect, their words almost casual. "Hey," Miller's voice said, "we're just outside." Open the door. "Cold out here," Lopez's voice added. "Fire's warmer inside." Davis covered his ears. "Shut it down, shut it the hell down." The sergeant gripped the dial. "No, listen." The chorus swelled. Men, women, children, laughter mixed with sobs. Words that weren't words but felt like they belonged inside your skull. And beneath it all, something larger, something older. The Wendigo's presence, not a voice but a weight, pressing against the walls, pressing against us. The console lights flickered. The leather straps on the chair creaked as if pulled by invisible hands. And then the Wendigo stepped into the doorway. It filled the hall, taller than the ceiling should have allowed. Its ribs glowed faintly, breath steaming in the cold. Its jaw unhinged, wider and wider, until the scream began. But no sound came out. Instead, the hum in the console rose, piercing, a frequency that made my teeth ache. The Wendigo's shape flickered, stretched, blurred, as if the air itself was folding it. The sergeant twisted the dial higher. "We can trap it." The console sparked. A burst of smoke shot from the panel. The lights went out. The hum died. The Wendigo snapped back into focus. It moved. The sergeant fired point blank. The rounds tore through its torso, splintering concrete behind it. The creature staggered, but didn't fall. It swung one long arm, and the sergeant was flung against the wall like a rag, his head striking with a crack that silenced him. Davis screamed and unloaded his rifle. Bullets ripped through the thing, chunks of plaster raining down, but it just kept coming. I grabbed the sergeant's pack, the aluminum case with the tapes, the folders, the manual. My rifle clattered on the floor. I didn't mean to drop it, but my hands were too full, too desperate. "Run!" I shouted. Davis hesitated, still firing, until the Wendigo's hand closed around his chest. The scream that came out of him was cut short, crushed into silence. I ran. Through hallways that bent the wrong way, past posters with faces that turned to watch me, past bunks that held shadows curled beneath blankets. I ran until daylight punched me in the eyes. The fog outside was thinner, the compound shrinking behind me like it had never been. And then I was alone. Just me. The pack on my shoulders, the forest ahead. The hum was gone, but the whisper wasn't. It followed me into the trees, curling around my ears, sinking into my chest. "Hungry," it said, and I knew I wasn't done yet. I don't remember how long I walked after Davis died. Time inside those ridges wasn't time anymore. Hours stretched until they felt like days. My watch had stopped, its hands frozen at 2:17, no matter how many times I shook it. The forest seemed to breathe with me, in and out, in rhythm, like it was waiting for me to fall into its lungs. But the pack kept me moving. The case with the reels, the manual, the folders, the last weight of proof. I told myself I wasn't carrying them for command or for the sergeant's ghosts. I was carrying them so someone, somewhere, would believe what we saw before the last of us vanished. The Wendigo shadowed me, not always visible, but always near. Sometimes I saw its ribs glowing faint through the fog. Sometimes I only heard the faint scrape of claws against stone. Sometimes its voice slipped into the air, wearing Davis's tone, or Lopez's, or Miller's. "Stop running. Rest a while. You can't leave." I didn't answer. I knew by then what answering meant. By midday, if it was midday, I found the road. It wasn't on our maps. It wasn't supposed to exist. But there it was. Cracked asphalt swallowed by roots, a faded yellow line splitting its back. Moss grew where cars should have been. At the bend ahead, a sign leaned crooked. Words rusted nearly away. I brushed the metal with my glove. "Property of U.S. Army, no entry." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because laughter was the only sound I still trusted. The road led me to the checkpoint. A gatehouse sagged on one side, windows boarded, paint peeling. The barrier arm was still raised. Beyond it, the road dropped out of the mountains, winding down toward valleys I hadn't seen in days. For the first time, I thought I might make it. I took one step past the barrier. And the Wendigo was there. It blocked the road, ribs shining faint, skin pale as bone, jaw splitting open. Its eyes burned like dead stars. I froze, rifle up. My last magazine clinked inside. I knew it wouldn't matter. The thing didn't move. It just stood there, head tilting slowly, like it was studying me. Its breath steamed white in the cold. Then it spoke, not in voices stolen from my squad, not in whispers. It spoke in something deeper, older, a vibration that sank into my skull. "You are mine." I wanted to fire, I wanted to scream, but my finger locked against the trigger. My lungs clamped shut. My whole body bowed under the weight of its stare. And then the aluminum case in my pack began to hum. The reels inside vibrated, faint at first, then stronger, until I could feel it through the straps. The Wendigo staggered, head jerking, ribs flaring with light. I don't know why. Maybe the tapes weren't just records. Maybe they held part of the frequency itself, the one built to contain it. Maybe whoever made them had known this moment would come. I tore the pack off, ripped open the case, and yanked a reel free. The tape unfurled in the wind, black ribbon whipping like a flag. The hum grew louder. The Wendigo screamed. The sound split the trees. Birds burst from the canopy in a black wave. My ears bled. My teeth rattled. But the thing reeled back, its frame blurring, its form collapsing like smoke dragged into a vent. I held the reel higher, screaming with it, though I couldn't hear my own voice anymore. The light inside its ribs flared, blinding white, then shattered into sparks that hissed out in the fog. And then, it was gone. No smoke, no body, no sound. Just empty road, fog rolling slow, forest still. I dropped to my knees, tape spilling from my hands, chest heaving. My blood ran hot from my ears, down my neck. My head rang like a shell blast, but I was alive. Alone, but alive. I made it down the mountain by nightfall. The road spat me into farmland, fields dead for the season, barns leaning under their own weight. At a crossroads, I found a payphone mounted crooked to a post. Miraculously, the line still worked. I called it in. I don't remember the words I used. Unit compromised, hostiles unknown, request immediate evac. Something like that. They came fast. Too fast. A black van, no markings, men in plain uniforms, faces blank. They pulled me inside, stripped the pack from my hands. No questions about what happened to the others. No shock, no grief. Just hands sorting through the reels, the manual, the folders, like they were confirming inventory. One of them asked for my weapon. I gave it. Another swabbed blood from my ears. A third gave me a shot in the arm that made the world spin. When I woke, I was in a hospital bed, white sheets, fluorescent hum. A nurse came, checked vitals, left without meeting my eyes. Later, an officer arrived, clipboard in hand, smile thin as wire. "Congratulations, Sergeant," he said. I wasn't a sergeant. Never had been. You've survived an unfortunate training accident in the Appalachians. The rest of your unit deserted. You'll be commended for your resilience. But his smile sharpened. You'll need to sign these debrief forms first. The papers said nothing about Wendigos, nothing about the stations, the bones, the tapes. Just environmental hazards exposure, psychological fatigue. A line at the bottom, by signing below, I affirm the report is complete and accurate. I sign. My hand shook, but I signed. Because men like him don't offer choices, they discharged me a week later. No medals, no ceremony, just a stamped file and a warning. Speak of this and you'll never see daylight again. That was years ago. The others never came back. Their families got folded flags, stories about desertion, dishonor. I still see their faces in dreams, stretched and pale, whispering through fog. The reels, the manual, the folders, they vanished into archives I'll never touch. Officially, they never existed. And the Wendigo, I don't know if I destroyed it or if I only drove it back. Sometimes I think I hear it, faint at night, claws scraping across concrete outside my window. Sometimes I wake with blood in my ears. But this testimony, this record, I'm leaving it behind. Not for command, not for the brass, for whoever finds it. You deserve to know why men disappear in those mountains, why compasses spin, why bones are buried in pits and stations rot under moss. You deserve to know what waits in the fog, because it's not myth, it's not legend, it's real, and someday it will come down from the ridges again.